Assalamualaikum and a very good day to our lecturer Dr. Yusri Hasrul bin Yusuf. Our group will present on the topic Shariah Audit. This presentation consists of 4 presenters, which are first me myself Muhammad Adam Faiz, second Muhammad Nabil, third Ni Amalin Husna, and lastly Nur Fatihah Aini. As for introduction, Shariah auditing is one of the most important aspects of Islamic bank operations as it relates to the way in which Islamic banks are held accountable. Accountability is one of the most important issues in Islamic banking operations as Islamic banks must ensure that their operations do not violate Shariah principles. Islamic banks were founded with the purpose of conducting business in strict accordance with Islamic Shariah. Therefore, Shariah banks must follow Shariah principles and do not engage in interest-based transactions. As a result, the governance mechanism is distinct from conventional institutions. In fact, Shariah audits must be conducted in accordance with the Shariah Supervisory Board's fatwas, rulings and guidelines, as well as the Accounting and Auditing Organisation for Islamic Financial Institutions Accounting Standards, National Accounting Standards and Guidelines, and relevant Malaysian legislation and regulations. As a result, a Shariah audit must not only adhere to Islamic law, but also to common law. Basically, Shariah auditing techniques are primarily meant to improve the attention on the financial part of an institution's report without interfering with conventional standards. Next, move to the definition of Shariah audit. Shariah Governance Framework by Bank Negara Malaysia defines Shariah audit as a periodic assessment conducted from time to time to provide an independent assessment and objective assurance designed to add value and improve the degree of compliance in relation to the business operation of Islamic financial institutions' business operations, with the main objective of ensuring a sound and effective internal control system for Shariah compliance. In this case, internal auditors who have received adequate Shariah-related knowledge and training can fulfill this duty. There are 3 main objectives of Shariah audit. First, to report the findings of Shariah compliance and non-compliance. Second, to assess the degree of non-compliance and its effect on the IFI as a whole. And third, to recommend corrective actions, improvement and rectifications necessary. Next, according to Shariah Governance Framework, the scope of Shariah audit includes first, audit of financial statement of the IFI, second, compliance audit on organizational structure, people, process and IT application systems, and third, review of adequacy of the Shariah governance process. Move to the need for Shariah compliance. Shariah compliance, according to the Accounting and Auditing Association for Islamic Financial Institutions, means compliance with Islamic Shariah rules and principles as reflected in the fatwas, rulings and guidelines issued by them. Since we have an Islamic banking system, Shariah compliance is required. Furthermore, to distinguish the Islamic financial system from the conventional financial system. Next, to assure contract acceptability, validity and foreseeability from a Shariah perspective. And lastly, to boost public confidence or perception of these stakeholders. The main differences between conventional audit and Shariah audit are first, party relationships. Conventional audit includes entity, auditor, user, while Shariah audit includes entity, auditor and broader range of users. Second, focus of audit. Conventional audit focuses on financial statements assertions, while Shariah audit focuses on financial statements as well as processes, contracts, personnel, system and performance. Third, regarding basis of audit, conventional audit based on IFRS, while Shariah audit based on Shariah rules and principles, BNM Shariah guidelines, BNM Shariah Governance Framework, Accounting and Auditing Association for Islamic Financial Institutions Standards, and appropriate parts of IFRS. Next, for sufficient evidence, conventional audit obtains documented evidence through physical observation, sampling, recomputation, analytical review, witness report, survey, and etc., while Shariah audit through SSB rulings, fatwas of international and national fiqh reports, and all other conventional evidence. And lastly, for written assurance report, the auditor prepares a standard audit report for conventional audit, while a Shariah auditor issued a more comprehensive report. So, I guess that's all from me. I will pass to the next presenter. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Now I will continue with Shariah Governance Framework. A well-developed governance structure is important for safety and soundness of Islamic financial institution (IFIs), and Shariah governance is also one of the important components of governance framework. Shariah Governance Framework is a set of organizational arrangement through which Islamic financial institutions ensure effective oversight, responsibility and accountability of the board of directors, management and Shariah committee. Bank Negara Malaysia BNM issued the Shariah Governance Framework in 2011 and the latest publication was in September 2019. For the objective, number 1 is set out the expectation of the bank of an IFI Shariah governance structure, process and arrangement to ensure that all its operation and business activities are in accordance with Shariah. Number 2, provides a comprehensive guidance to the board, Shariah committee and management of the IFI in discharging its duties in matters relating to Shariah. And number 3, outlines the function relating to Shariah review, Shariah audit, Shariah risk management and Shariah research. Islamic financial institution has established 3 functions that provide a system of checks and balance within the organization, which include the following. Number 1, a Shariah risk management control function that is able to identify all possible risks of Shariah non-compliance and where appropriate remedial measures to manage these risks. A Shariah review function that continuously assess Shariah compliance of all activities and operation. Where instances of non-compliance are identified, the institution is expected to take prompt rectification measures and put in place the necessary mechanism to avoid such recurrences. And number 3, the Shariah audit function that performs annual audit to provide an independent assessment of the adequacy and compliance of the Islamic financial institution with established policies and procedures and the adequacy of the Shariah governance process. This standard is applicable to all Islamic financial institutions (IFI), which include licensed Islamic banks, licensed takaful and retakaful operators, licensed bank and investment bank approved to carry out Islamic banks business, prescribed development financial institution approved to carry out Islamic banks business, and Shariah committee members. The first issue is lack of qualified Shariah auditor. The Shariah governance framework has set out some requirements for a person to be qualified as Shariah auditor, which includes the person is a Muslim individual, the person has to be assessed to have met the requirements specified in the policy document on fit and proper criteria on a continuous basis, and the person is either a Shariah qualified person, which the requirements are: number 1, holds a minimum of bachelor's degree in Shariah, which includes study in Usul Fiqh or Fiqh Muamalah. Number 2, possesses solid knowledge in Shariah with reasonable Islamic finance knowledge and experience of the relevant industry. And number 3, demonstrates strong proficiency and knowledge in written and verbal Arabic with good command in the preferred language or the either Bahasa Malaysia or English language, or an expert who possesses skills, knowledge and experience related to support the roles and responsibility of the Shariah committee. Based on the guidelines, Shariah auditors are supposed to be knowledgeable in both Shariah and accounting. It is crucial to provide a suitable level of competent human capital in order to argue for the legitimacy of Islamic financial goods and services. But unfortunately, the majority of Shariah auditors are not competent in both fields of expertise, according to a certain research. The lack of auditing practitioners who are qualified in both Shariah and contemporary accounting may have an unfavorable impact on the development of Shariah auditing and the Islamic financial industry as a whole. In this context, the urge to fill this gap has gained attraction at the higher education level, with universities taking on the role of creating graduates who are well versed in Shariah auditing. Adequate training must be done as a method to overcome this issue. That's all from me. I will pass to Amal Nusna to explain the next part. Thank you.
Thank you, Nabil. So I will continue this presentation with the second issue in Sharia audit, which is lack of independence and accountability of Sharia auditing practitioners. Firstly, we focus first on the lack of independence in Sharia auditing practitioners. It is one of the most critical issues that has risen in Sharia auditing. As an internal Sharia auditors, they should be able to demonstrate that there is no threat to their independence to gain the trust of stakeholders. This is because Islamic financial institutions or IFI stakeholders deem the auditors to have integrity through the perceived independence of the Sharia auditors themselves in appearance and in act. It is also suggested that Shariah auditors are expected to be independent enough to provide an opinion on whether the IFIs are operating in accordance with Shariah rulings. According to a study, there is a serious conflict of interest between the responsibility to uphold the independence in Shariah audit and fulfilling one's need to get paid for their services according to the requirement of the institution they are attached to. The findings are also in line with a recent study by Rahim and Sainz, which stated that since Shariah audit is done internally and employed by the company, thus the competence of the individual performing the audit has been questioned pertaining to bias issues. Therefore, it is important for IFIs to ensure that their activities and operations are Shariah compliant in order to reduce the Shariah non-compliant risk, which has the potential to cause severe consequences and potentially tarnish the reputation by putting the entire Islamic finance industry at risk. Next is the lack of accountability in Shariah auditing practitioners. IFIs face another issue in terms of Shariah audit in assuring the IFIs comply with the Shariah guideline. In the case of independence, the issue is on scrutinizing the independence between Shariah auditors in IFI. The accounting standards and practices bodies have taken a serious action on this issue in order to ensure that Shariah auditors are held accountable for carrying out their responsibility of expressing their judgment fairly on whether the financial statements that have been prepared are in accordance with Shariah principles. It is perceived that the roles of Shariah auditors are also limited to preparation of financial reports rather than influencing the decision-making process of IFIs, as Board of Directors will make the final decision. As the Board of Directors holds a greater capacity in making important decisions, the limitation of power in influencing decisions of the Board by the Shariah auditors indicates that the auditors have lack of accountability. By right, the Shariah auditor has big responsibilities because they have to be accountable to the stakeholders, which include the shareholders, the society and the Ummah, but most importantly, they are accountable to Allah for every action and inactions. Next, I will proceed with the case of MK Associates Sdn Berhad versus Bank Islam Malaysia Berhad that relates with the Shariah compliance in Islamic banking operations. In this case, MK Associate had entered into agreement of Al-Bay Bitaman Ajil with Bank Islam Malaysia Berhad. However, it had default installments of Al-Bay Bitaman Ajil. The defendant, Bank Islam Malaysia Berhad, has claimed the outstanding balance of the facility together with ta'wid or compensation for late payment in the amount of 10,384,262.88 ringgit Malaysia for the period of 30 months from January 2000 to June 2012. There are three main issues involved in this case, which are whether the defendant was entitled to charge the plaintiff ta'wid pursuant to the agreements. Second, whether the defendant was entitled in law to charge the plaintiff ta'wid. And third, whether the defendant was entitled to charge ta'wid in the sum of they claimed. The word ta'wid here can be defined as compensation on the actual loss suffered by the financier or the bank due to late payment by the debtor. So, according to the court, the plaintiff must be aware of the imposition of ta'wid in order for consent to be valid. The plaintiff in this case was unfamiliar with the term ta'wid because it was not used by IFIs at the time the agreements were signed in 1998. Thus, the plaintiff is not entitled to charge ta'wid in law. So, I guess that's all from me. I will pass this presentation to the next presenter.
Thank you, Amalin. I'm Fatia and I will continue with the third issue of Shariah auditing, which is there is no specific guidelines for external Shariah audit. But before we go further with the issue, first let me explain a little bit about external auditing. External auditing is a series of activities that are performed on an organization's financial statements to ensure that there are no errors or deceits that could result in material misstatements. It also guarantees that these financial statements were prepared in accordance accordance with all applicable local and international financial reporting standards. Thus, it is a bit different with the Shariah audit, where the external Shariah audit is quite in demand and being developed in the area of Shariah governance of the global Islamic banking industry. External Shariah audit is able to maintain the credibility of the Islamic banks' claims of Shariah compliance, which are frequently viewed with skepticism by critics. Hence, the Shariah compliance assurance provided by an independent entity, which is the external Shariah auditor, will provide more assurance to Islamic bank stakeholders. But who is the external Shariah auditor and what is their role? So an external Shariah auditor is a firm inter alia having professional knowledge and competence of auditing and relevant Shariah principles and rules. Their role is doing the annual Shariah compliance review, identifying significant breach in Shariah compliance with the potential to transform into reputational risk, and if required by the supervisory authorities, they need reporting to them any material Shariah non-compliance identified when auditing the Islamic banks. Back to our issue, which is there are no specific guidelines for external Shariah audit. Introducing an appropriate Shariah audit framework will help in creating trust and importance for every country. And by having a clear Shariah auditing framework, there will be a comprehensive set of guidelines, policies, and SOP to differentiate between the roles and functions. However, there are several reasons which make the current standard insufficient for Shariah auditing practice, which is a guideline did not state specifically on the auditing process that should be performed. As everyone knows, the Central Bank of Malaysia, BNM, is the key regulator of Malaysia Islamic financial institutions and Shariah auditing practice. However, there are also several other institutions whose rules and regulations have been adapted to suit Shariah requirements. Thus, it can be seen that there are no specific guidelines for external Shariah audit that is practiced in Malaysia. It is because any institution or organization can make adjustments accordingly to meet their needs and Shariah. Moving to the next reasons why there are no specific guidelines for external Shariah audit is because the external Shariah auditor needs to refer to many guidelines and frameworks. This is because many studies have expressed the opinion that the framework is too brief in relation to providing a generally accepted procedure for the performance of a Shariah audit. Thus, it requires external Shariah auditors additional knowledge in performing their tasks that make them need to refer to many guidelines and frameworks. The role of external Shariah auditor could not be performed effectively and efficiently. It is because of following the no one-size-fits-all philosophy, the Islamic Financial Service Board IFSB has not detailed the audit scope of external Shariah auditors. Instead, it has advocated the supervisory authorities to issue guidelines for an external Shariah audit in their respective jurisdictions. Next, there are some recommendations that we think it will give a positive impact for future developments of Shariah auditing. Firstly, for the roles of regulator and financial institutions, as we know, the Central Banks of Malaysia, BNM, who are the regulator, and also the financial institutions will be in charge of establishing professional standards for Shariah auditor scope, definitions, and skill sets. So there is a need to have a solid framework for internal and external audit, and for regulators to check on a consistent basis that the Shariah auditor perform their work according to the Shariah principles. Second recommendation is in the area of qualifications and innovations in Shariah auditing. Internal auditors should have the necessary skills and qualifications to expand their capabilities, where they will be able to conduct a normal conventional auditings while also specializing in Shariah auditing. Besides, internal auditors should broaden their skill sets and activities, as well as becoming more proactive in their jobs. Other than that, innovations is also required, where the developments of an audit change management program, which encompasses the data management, IT system, and regulatory requirements in Shariah audit. Last but not least, the recommendations on the roles of professional bodies and associations. Professional bodies and associations should play a role in treating talent to meet the industry's needs, such as through providing professional Shariah certification courses and training programs. It is important to equip the Shariah people with the necessary professional skills and Shariah awareness and knowledge. As for the conclusion, Sharia compliance is very important, and the negative consequences will not only have a financial impact, but it will also be a violation of Allah Subhanahu Wa Ta'ala instructions and a barrier to Allah Subhanahu Wa Ta'ala blessings. As we had presented, Sharia compliance auditing still has issues and challenges in terms of lack of qualified Sharia auditors, independence and accountability of Sharia auditing practitioners, and also no specific guidelines and standards. As a result, closing the gap is critical as it may have an impact on stakeholders' confidence in the Sharia compliance of Islamic financial institutions, products and services, as well as their operations and activities. So that's all from us. Thank you so much to Dr. Yusri and everyone for listening.